if I can ask you a question on regarding the Bureau of Meteorology, you've presented evidence time and again that they're altering their historic records of temperatures, altering or installing measuring equipment that don't meet their own standards of an accurate reading. Among the things you did for your research was travel to the National Library in Canberra to check the historical records there. Could you explain more about some of the things you've discovered regarding the Bureau of Meteorology?
Actually, but that where I actually went was the National Archives Storage Centre at Yagoona in Sydney. And they've got a big warehouse there, so they've got all the original records. So what I wanted to check was some of the, all the original handwritten records. So I'll give you the example. It was Wilcannia. So Wilcannia had they have a booklet which they would fill out in the most beautiful handwriting sort of thing. You know, looks almost like computer generated hand script they would write in, and they would record the temperature, the maximum, the minimum, the wind speed, the cloud cover. They'd record all this stuff, and you could imagine these people recording this information. Like, not the pride's not the correct word, but how they would have understood that they were recording stuff that was scientifically important for history, and how they would have gone to the meticulous lengths that they would have gone to make sure that their book was accurately done and accurately recorded the measurements. Now, there's a few. So that was just to see these old records back from 1901 and 1905 and 1939. That was just you felt like you made sure you wear white gloves with touches to such valuable historical information. Now, just let me give you one example of what the Bureau of Meteorology has done. A great headline is that there's never been a day of 50 degrees in New South Wales, right? If we have a 50-degree day, they could go, oh my God, it's 50 degrees for the first time ever, right? Well, Wilcannia recorded 50 degrees, I think it was back on the 11th of January, 1939. Right? So I wanted to go and check the action. So it's actually in the Australian ABS, Bureau of Statistics yearbooks from 2008 backwards, 2002, right? And it's in old newspaper clippings, 50 degrees at Wilcannia, 1939. So I thought, I'll just go back and check if that was correct. So I went and got the original archives. We got the page for January 1939, and I think whatever the date was there, it was 122 degrees. I haven't got it. 122 degrees, I think, is some of my pictures I calculated. Like 122 degrees is exactly 50 degrees Celsius, exactly, right? So here's the record. Here it was listed in all the ABS. And when you go back to those ABS, it says source Bureau of Meteorology. You go to the Bureau of Meteorology's website today and you look up the hottest temperatures in New South Wales, the Wilcannia record is missing. It's vanished. It's gone down a memory hole. It doesn't exist. So I asked the Bureau and said, what happened to this record? What happened to it? Why are you putting out these glossy brochures that shows New South Wales never had a day of 50 degrees when 10 years ago, in all your records, it shows it was 50 degrees, when the newspaper clippings of the day show it's 50 degrees. And when I've got the original, here it is here, the original paper, the original, it shows it was 50 degrees. I says, and you don't say there's anything. And they say, do you question the original recording? No. So why have you put out this piece of paper that is misleading and deceptive when you know it's wrong? And they said, the Wilcannia records haven't been digitized. I said, well, what the hell does that mean? What do you mean not digitized? So what it actually means, someone hasn't gone to that record and actually put it into a computer format that they can put on their website. So it's not as though the record doesn't exist and it never happened, which they're making out. The excuse they give, even though they've got all these thousands of employees and the records go back to 1939 and they've been putting stuff in digital formats for like 30 years, 20 plus years, because someone hasn't gone around and put it into the digitized computer bank from the original record, the record doesn't exist.
Well, although on top of that, the equipment itself is not measuring accurately, like some of the places where they're measuring the temperature.
this is a great trick that they've done, okay? When our original, we go back and you read, it was Clement Ragg and some of these great men throughout our history. When they set up the, what was the old Weather Bureau, now the Bureau of Meteorology, there was an argument about what size the Stevenson screen had. Now, the Stevenson screen are those white louvered boxes. The thermometer sits in the middle of the screen. And the white louvered box allows air to flow through, but doesn't allow the sun's rays to touch the bulb. And it sits a metre off the ground. It's all standardised. And there was an argument in Australia about whether we should have a large size Stevenson screen or a smaller size. And the large size, might have been probably about, I think maybe 2 foot long, right? And about so high, yeah. Or the small size. And the small size was used in England. And Clement Ragg actually, in the records, they said, we think the large size is better because we think the smaller one records overly hot temperatures where it's very hot and potentially doesn't record accurately in the freezing temperatures. Because we've got, remember in Australia, we've not got much hotter temperatures in the UK. We get much colder temperatures up at Thredbo and Perisher and those places where we get minus 20s. They're actually colder than the UK. So our range of temperatures, they said, we'll go with the large size Stevenson screen. And that was the standard equipment throughout the place with the thermometers inside there. Okay. So recently they decided they would change the size of the Stevenson screen. So they put these smaller Stevenson screens in that they knew that changing the size of the Stevenson screen would give them hotter temperature readings in winter. Well, it makes sense. You've got the box itself around the Stevenson screen, gets hot itself, the paint and the wood around it, that retains the heat. So the closer the bulb would be to the outside of the screen, you are likely to get warmer temperatures. That just seems common logic. The question is how much you don't really know. So knowing this, they changed the size of the Stevenson screen, knowing they would get hotter recorded temperatures. And since they did this, there was a study published in Spain, and they actually tested that. They tested the large Stevenson screen against the small Stevenson screen, and they wanted to find out if it would have any effect on temperatures. And guess what it found? It found up to a 1 degree temperature hotter reading in the peak of summer on a windless day. So we have got equipment today by changing the size of the Stevenson screen, which is giving us hotter recordings than what we had in the past. And these people know about it, and I've asked them, who made the decision to change from the large size that was being used for over a century to go back to the smaller size? They said, we don't know.
Is it theoretically, is it possible to for someone to make it, get the information together, make a case and take them to court?
Well, possibly. That's only one thing that they've done. The other argument they did, one of the hottest day recorded in Australia, it was Burke in 1909, a January day in Burke, where there was 125 degrees was recorded, which was, I think, 51.7 or something, 125 degrees. And the data, I went and checked that, saw it in my own eyes that it was there, it was right, okay. Some of the Bureau of Meteorology reject that record, and the reasons that they've done, pardon the French, are just plate bullshit. They said, nowhere else on that day recorded 100, anywhere near 125. So therefore the record is suspect. Now, the nearest weather station is Warrana. So I went and had a look at the records of Warrana. On the day that Burke had 125, Warrana, the nearest station, 123. So their excuse is just complete and utter BS. And what they've done, what annoys me, I can just imagine that person that recorded that recording back in 1909, how he would have thought his job was important, and he was recording for posterity. And he's recorded accurately, he's measured, make sure it was written down, and all the records of the day show that was a record hot day across the area. Huh? And a century later, some guy sitting at a desk in Canberra goes, I reckon this is wrong. It couldn't have been that hot back then. and makes up some cock and bull story excuse full of misinformation and lies to change the record. This is the Australian Bureau of Meteorology today. And when I put, and people go, oh, you shouldn't criticise them, you shouldn't criticise them. Well, we should criticise them. They should be held to account because they are using taxpayers' money and they are misleading the Australian public.